Hello, everyone. My name is Riley, and I'm here with my co host Matt, and welcome to Quadrant 4 Politics, the news and politics podcast from a conservative and libertarian perspective. However, we are welcoming to people from all over the political compass. Today's date is October 5th, 2018. So if any current events happen after this, I'm sorry, we will not be discussing those because we don't know about the future yet,
It's
unfortunately.
almost certain, though, that things are going to be affected in the next 2 days. But
For sure. Before we begin, I just want to say be sure to check us out on SoundCloud. We pay a premium for that. You should definitely check it out there because it's a better viewing, listening experience. You can put your screen to sleep on your phone while you're listening to us, which YouTube doesn't allow you to do. Also, you can download the podcast on YouTube if you don't have data. So definitely do SoundCloud, but we are also on YouTube if that is your preference, if you have YouTube Red or something like that. So today's podcast is going to consist of 5 topics. We're going to start with our grab bag question, where we pull a random question from the political compass test, which we don't support 100%, but it is still fun regardless. We'll bring that up every time, I think. Let me see. We're going to discuss Kavanaugh a little bit because there's been some new updates on that story. We're going to briefly talk about Bill Cosby because I thought that it was something that was noteworthy. Then we're going to play a really quick game. And then our final main topic of the day will be us discussing our thoughts on the death penalty, which is going to be a unique conversation because we have thoughts on that disagree with our probably political parties. That's what I'd say. All right, cool. Matt, you ready to start?
I'm ready to start, and as usual, I get to pick the question.
Cool. Let's start with the grab bag question.
Grab bag question.
Again, if you guys are interested in checking out the political compass test, just look it up on Google and you'll be able to find all these questions. We randomize them so that we could just answer one at the beginning of every show because it's a fun thing to do. It's a nice icebreaker, I'd say.
Okay. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. So there's lots of ways to think about this. There's where your tax dollars going. Is it worth putting people in prison for long amounts of time for either use, possession, distributing? I think it's gotten to the point to where most people who even call themselves, very conservative don't have much to lean on in ways of supporting this. Alcohol seems to be more dangerous, yet it's legal. There's the issue that we can make money off of it with taxes. So I know we've talked about waiting to the end to just say what our opinion is going to be, but I think it's pretty obvious right out the gate that it's going to be strongly agree.
Yeah, let me see. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. I strongly agree with that. I think that all drugs should be legal, and that can be an entire discussion topic one day if we want. But yeah, I support legalizing all drugs, and marijuana is obviously it is a gateway drug in that sense, it leads us in the right direction of legalizing more drugs.
As far as legalizing all drugs, that's not something I completely oppose, but I think I'm definitely more okay with people who are in prison for, distributing a bunch of coke that ended up killing people or whatnot, as opposed to, some 16-year-old puffing on a marijuana cigarette,
yeah,
whatnot. I will say with this one, it's interesting is I think during our episode 1, I said, I was mentioning the 2012 ballot, and I said, that ballot took me like 12 hours to fill out because I'm a really concise voter, and I said it also had the gay marriage and the pot one on it. What I never said was that I voted against it, and I didn't vote against it because I didn't believe weed should be legalized. I voted against it because when I read the pro and the anti side for the issue, what I found was that what they said as far as the financial cost goes was that there was financial statement of what would be earned in taxes, and then there was all sorts of different aspects, what they would save from not prosecuting the criminals. One thing that they admitted to on the pro side is they said, we cannot determine what the consequences financially would be if the federal government got involved, as this is still federally illegal. And I think, especially with the current Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, that's become a bigger problem. Now, I don't think that's worth a whole discussion, but it shows how I think. Because there was a little problem, or there was a potentially big problem, I decided it would be better if we just went without legalizing it until they could work out those kinks.
So you voted against legalizing marijuana because it was federally illegal?
Not because it was federally illegal, because the statement directly said we cannot even begin to estimate how much it would cost the state if we were persecuted by the feds.
Yeah.
And because of that, I said, okay, you can't give me a number on that. You're potentially saying our state could go into deep debt with the federal government. I'm not voting for that.
Yeah.
So if it had just been a simple issue of like decriminalizing it or something, to where people wouldn't be spending lots of time in jail, that's one thing. But to make it legal and the state government supporting it while the federal government still says it's illegal, and that potentially being costly to the taxpayers, I had to vote against it. But it wasn't because I'm against marijuana. I will say that I used to smoke marijuana like plenty in high school. Wasn't a stoner, but I smoked enough, and I smoked a few times in the past few years. I don't really like it, but it's not too harmful. It's when I was a kid, I was taught like all drugs are bad. Like you're taught kind of like marijuana is on the same level with everything, and they sell beer in stores to grown-ups. And then prescriptions, you get those from the doctor, so those are okay. And we're kind of learning like it's all backwards,
Yeah.
So
Well, that's just with the way we were like this society thought for a long time, and we're starting to change the way society thinks about marijuana and drugs in general. I think now there's a couple of points that you talked about that I wanted to respond to. I think now Jeff Sessions would be incredibly stupid to attack any state for legalizing marijuana right now, because I think it is pretty much a bipartisan issue. I think obviously Jeff Sessions and Trump and the Republicans have their base that are still against it, but I think for the most part it is something that most people want. Most people believe in personal liberty.
Well, and I think even a lot within that hardcore conservative Christian base, I would say you could probably even break those up into two camps of ones that say we don't want our kids doing it, but legalize it. Don't spend our police money dealing with that, and then the other that still holds
also,
strict morals.
It's so clear that if you see someone who's addicted to marijuana, and it's hard, the debate on the addiction I think is still up in the air. I think most people say it's not addictive, but I still think some people say it's addictive. But I'd rather someone be addicted to marijuana than alcohol. I grew up in a family of alcoholics, and alcohol killed my mom. So it's like, looking at weed, it's like the risk of dying from weed is way lower. The damage to your body, I mean, it's still having any smoke in your body is bad, but even taking edibles of marijuana, I think over the long term it won't do nearly as much damage as alcohol does to your liver. My mom died of alcohol-induced cirrhosis to the liver. It just destroyed her. Alcohol leads to abuse and drunk driving, and whereas marijuana leaves you to having munchies and laughing, So, I personally, I've gotten high a few times, and I don't generally enjoy it. Actually, I think it affects me a little bit. I talked to my doctor about it because it hurt my heart. Like, I had a huge chest pain last time I got like wicked baked, and like it was really stressful for me. I don't know if I just get really paranoid or what, but generally it's something like I might do it if I'm on vacation, but I'm not super into it.
Didn't you say you've never smoked it?
I've never smoked it. No, I don't like it. Having smoke in my lungs, it seems like a bad idea. So just edibles like brownies, and since the weed stores are open now, we can get all sorts of fun edibles there, and candies and sodas. Well, I mean, there's quite a few states where you can buy weed now.
Like 7 or 8, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's and a lot of people who come to our area. They, the first thing someone does when they come to my area of employment is they ask me, where's the weed store, because they're coming from out of state. So yeah, I think people come here mainly for that, or not mainly for that, but that's something that they definitely enjoy while they're here partaking.
And I have a mom who is she is in chronic pain, and she was on painkillers for years, and with this whole opiate epidemic, they've kicked her off, and I think it's totally messed up, but that's a discussion in and of itself of whether or not we should be punishing those in actual pain for the people abusing opiates. But I've told her, I said, you live in one of, a very small minority of states that allows you to get weed, and you've said it helps your pain. Why don't you just do that,
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because there's still that high effect that comes from the pills that's more euphoric and hits the pain better, because a painkiller doesn't actually kill your pain. It just lies to your brain and tells you everything's fine. So,
and there's also CBD, I believe it's called, which is, you and I both know someone, I won't say their name on the air, but you and I both know someone who I'd say is probably against marijuana, but recently you started using CBD for pain purposes, and doesn't get high from it at all, but it's still it would have been against the law before marijuana was legalized, which is pretty cool. And I've had girlfriends in the past who say they use marijuana for pain and for helping with their sleep, which I don't doubt. I bet it helped, but I think for the most part they just wanted to get high.
Probably.
And it was their excuse.
And that's, I think, why let's skip the doctors and let's just go to the dispensaries.
Yeah. Although those green cards get you weed that's a lot more powerful, and it's a lot cheaper too.
All
right, ready to jump on to the next topic?
Yeah, so this topic, it's super interesting, but I don't know, the last couple hours I've been kind of nervous to talk about it, and it's, as we mentioned, the date today is Friday, October 5th. As of right now, as of today, earlier today, every senator has declared how they're going to vote, and it pretty much comes out to a 51-49 in favor of confirmation, with one Democrat defecting to confirm and one Republican defecting to oppose. There is also a Republican set to confirm. I can't remember his last name. He's from Montana. He's said he'll be at his daughter's wedding, so unless they want to do the hearing at 3 a.m. the next morning,
You'd figure he'd avoid his daughter's wedding for something
it was something that had been planned out for months.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, if I was him, I would tell Mitch McConnell, you guys can wait till Monday, my daughter's getting married once.
So if you had to choose between your daughter's wedding or voting on the Supreme Court nomination, what would you choose?
I would choose my daughter's wedding.
Really?
Yes, because, and let me preface this with the Republican who's opposing it is Lisa Murkowski, which I love what Palin said today. And I don't say that very often anymore, but she said, at Lisa Murkowski, I can see the 2020 elections from my house. And I thought...
Wait, so she's going to get voted out?
That's what Palin suggested. I don't know if she will or not. I think Alaska was... it's primarily Trump country.
Is she from Alaska?
Yes, she's a senator from Alaska. She is the only one who opposed of the Republicans. Jeff Flake said he will confirm...
Do we know why she voted against him? Is it because of the allegations?
She said she thinks he's a good man and he's a good judge, but just with everything, she can't get behind it. And this is what's so concerning for me. This is why I haven't been comfortable with it for the past couple of hours.
Before we jump any further, do we need to explain the situation more about what's going on? Kavanaugh, as we talked about last week on the show, he is the Supreme Court nomination by Trump. He had sexual allegations against him. He had the hearings already. And today they had the vote on if they should go ahead with the real vote. I don't think there's anything else for the audience that we need to clear up before we start really discussing it, right? That's pretty much where we're at right now?
That's where we're at, yeah.
Okay, cool.
And that, aside from the actual vote, unless a senator between now and 3:30 p.m. D.C. time tomorrow changes their mind, which is unlikely and unprecedented, Kavanaugh is going to be a Supreme Court justice, and part of me, and I didn't realize this until after I realized this was going to happen, but part of me now kind of wishes that Trump would have just picked someone else or something. That way we didn't have to have the question of is a rapist on the court. But then again, there's two sides to the issue, and there's two relevant sides. You have people who are supporting Dr. Ford without knowing her, without knowing her story. You know, nobody knows either of these two people really that well. And there are people supporting Kavanaugh and people supporting Ford, and one of their lives is getting totally effed over, if not both, you know, because some people have mentioned the possibility that, you know, perhaps, you know, those events did happen, but it wasn't Kavanaugh, you know.
There's a chance that both these people will be discussed in history classes in the future.
Exactly. And I ultimately like Kavanaugh. I'm glad he's got confirmed.
Well, we're like 80% sure he's going to get
Yes,
confirmed.
I said 85 to you earlier today, and I'd say we're at probably about 90% right now.
But Trump won the election, so 90% means nothing.
Exactly, right? But, I mean, worst case scenario is, well, one thing I wanted to talk about, I didn't expect we were going to get to this point. I didn't expect we were going to reach today so quickly, because one part is that the FBI closed their investigation. They said, hey, do this investigation within a week, and they did it like in 4 days or something. And the Republicans are all saying it was a great, thorough review, and the Democrats
are like, this is ridiculous.
They
didn't even talk to the people who
exactly.
accused him.
And, you know, there's good points on both of those sides. Why didn't they talk to some people? At the same time,
it was the FBI who did it, right?
Yeah.
I trust the FBI because the Republicans and Democrats both dislike the FBI. And if anyone who is disliked by the Republicans and Democrats is a good person in my eyes.
Well, you know, and also Kavanaugh has already been like investigated by the FBI like 8 times just in this proceeding. Like, I think there's probably a reason they kept it short, which is like,
it was like, what are we gonna do? Just go over all the paperwork?
Yeah, like we've dug into this stuff already. But you know, some people disagree with that. That's fine.
I mean, they should have talked to the people who. There were some people who reached out to the FBI who said they had some support of the accusations, and the FBI didn't even call them back, which, you know, is a little bit concerning. But ultimately, I think the FBI did what the FBI needs to do, and they're not a part of the Republican Party. As a matter of fact, a lot of the Republican Party is angry with the FBI right now. So I feel like the FBI can be trusted, and if they think that what they did was enough investigation, then I'm willing to take their word at it.
And I would pretty much agree. And I would say that, I would say that, you know, you can investigate them all the more you want. You can interview everybody you want. You're never going to get down to the truth.
It's just such an impossible thing to prove.
As much as they should have interviewed all these people, they also shouldn't have pulled this 11th hour accusation out that had been known about. Mm-hmm. Like, and I understand Dianne Feinstein. I do agree she was probably keeping it confidential for Dr. Ford. She probably should have said to Dr. Ford, hey, we're moving forward with these discussions. Like, it's now or never, you know, which I know is a whole thing. Like, you don't say that to a victim. And I understand that I haven't been sexually assaulted because I'm a male, and I don't know what that's like. I get that. That does not change the fact that a person is presumed innocent until found guilty. And while that is in the court of law and not during a confirmation process, as Susan Collins said today while she was explaining why she is voting to confirm Brett Kavanaugh, she said, even in a confirmation process, when an allegation is made, there has to be at least more evidence supporting the allegation than evidence against it. As to where in a court, there would have to be so much evidence that you have no doubt in your mind. At least for the confirmation, you want to at least have more than not. And
if you don't mind me interjecting here real quick, I saw a really interesting ad from the Democrats from a liberal side that really made me think, and it said, we should not have someone on the Senate if there's any doubt at all. And it made me, it was really good.
Supreme Court?
On the Supreme Court, I apologize. And it really made me think, like, you know, that is a good point. We shouldn't have someone sitting in office if there's any doubt that they may have committed a crime. But then I also thought to myself, like, my argument against that is the way our court system works is beyond a reasonable doubt you are innocent until proven guilty. So even though that's a really good argument, is that, yeah, we would prefer to have someone in government who there is no doubt that they're a good person, it's still it still doesn't justify ruining his chances if it's not beyond a reasonable doubt, you know. And you also brought up something about, like, is this really the hill for Republicans to die on, which is another thing that Democrats have been bringing up recently. Like, why didn't Trump just select someone else? And I think that it's just really the Republicans fighting back against the Me Too movement. This is, it's not about the Supreme Court anymore. It's about politics, and the Democrats saying, like, they're, like I said last week or last episode, that this is a win-win situation for them, is that they're just trying to make the Republicans look bad, and like they're voting for a rapist, and then the Democrats are trying to, or the Republicans are trying to show their muscles, like, see, your Me Too movement isn't going to stop all of us. It's not going to, we're not going to let it control our lives anymore. And so I feel like it's not even about the Supreme Court anymore. It's just like they're each trying to fight their own agenda, which is kind of dumb. And I understand both sides, but you're right. The best decision probably would have been if Trump just said, okay, this guy's causing too much trouble. Let's select a woman who's a strong conservative.
We'd have to go back and replay. I don't know if I said that would have been the best. I think that's what I would have wanted. I think out of a matter of principle, which Trump doesn't do things on the matter of principle. So let me say it this way. Had I been the president who selected Kavanaugh, on matter of principle, I would have said, until you have a good reason for me to pull his confirmation, we are going to go forward as long as it takes. And once you provide me with something that really shows me in a nonpartisan way that he is a threat, then we're going to continue forward. And I am just frustrated at some of the behavior we've seen by past victims, how they automatically assume that everyone who's voting for Kavanaugh is just against them. And Susan Collins laid it out real nice today. She said, this is not an action against the Me Too movement. If anything, this can make their voice louder. She said to whoever leaked Dr. Ford's letter in this room, basically, like, pretty much, how can you live with yourself? But the one good thing that might come out of it is that more women are going to be speaking out.
Yeah. People on Twitter are freaking out about her right now. They're like, they're showing links to her opponents who are running against her in 2020. I believe that's when her election time is. And they're like, go donate to these people, support them. And what state is she from? Maine? Yeah, I don't really know what Maine's situation is, but it's just a shame. Like, I understand having political opinions and wanting to support certain candidates, but the viciousness from the left is what makes the party so unattractive to me. And I understand that there's a lot about the I'm not a Republican, I'm a libertarian, but I have a lot of issues with Republicans, like those the filthy Christians who share stuff on Facebook that's really cringeworthy, and, you know, post, like, the MAGA hat wearing people, you know, those are the Republicans I don't like. But there's a lot of those Republicans aren't in office, whereas the Democrats, who are the ones who I think are cringeworthy and vicious, they are the ones in office. And it really makes me dislike the party, because they can't do anything in a respectable manner, and it's unfortunate, to be honest.
Well, an interesting counterpoint to that is I saw something on ABC today that said you have within the Republican Party, you have Trump Republicans and you have non-Trump Republicans, but they're all kind of coming together on this Kavanaugh issue and saying this is something that we're not backing down from, you know. And this was a guy he was talking on ABC, and they were being, you know, pretty reasonable with this guy. He'd worked with Brett Kavanaugh in the Bush administration, but he does something now in the media. I don't remember exactly what it was, but, you know, he made a good case in the other direction, that, you know, this is bringing Republicans together and saying we're not going to stand up for basically allegations that have nothing to stand on, or at least nothing concrete to stand on. I'm not saying there was nothing there, but it's something that, and I can't say I understand why women don't come forward because I'm not a woman, but I definitely say it probably makes sense when you have been raped. I can only imagine how that feels. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, that's just kind of the reality of the situation. Is if you want to bring something up 35 years later and have it have a strong effect, that's kind of fairy tale land, whether or not you're right in doing it or not.
I don't think. Let's say that this did happen to her. I don't think that she's necessarily wrong with waiting. I don't know how it's affected her life, but let's say it happened and she was able to move on and not let it define her. And I think that's. I don't really. I have some personal stuff. I don't know if I'm really comfortable to share on the podcast, but I think it's you shouldn't let a sexual abuse define you. I think that if you get sexually abused and you let it define your life and you're miserable because of one event in your life, I think that makes you a weak person. But I don't know what her life is, but it happened 35. Let's say it did happen 35 years ago, and she decided to move on and become make herself stronger because of it, and not just dwelling on it her entire life. But then she sees that this guy's going to be nominated to the highest court of the land, and she says, well, this happened to me. I don't know if he's necessarily the one for the job. I don't necessarily think that she's wrong in that, but 35 years later, it's going to be damn hard to prove. And she, she might not even have come forward thinking like, I'm not trying to prevent him from getting on the case from the court. I think that's what she was doing, what the Democrats were trying to do. But, even if that wasn't her perspective, it's still it's kind of her responsibility to say, hey, this happened to me. I'm just going to share it with you guys, let you know. And then it decided to blow up,
So why wasn't it her responsibility in 2006 when he was appointed to the D.C. Appeals Court?
It didn't. I've never heard Brett Kavanaugh before this,
But my point is if somebody had done this to you and they're getting a nomination to a federal court position, and we've talked about how we focus on the presidency and the Senate races and the Supreme Court, but the lower ones, the closer they are to you, really have more effect on you. And the fact is that of all the federal cases, the Supreme Court ends up choosing to review 2% of their cases. So a lot of those appeals courts and district courts are the final courts, and they set precedent on a lot of these issues. But it wasn't a problem until it was going to be something where, in my opinion, where Roe versus Wade was, that's where they saw a potential problem, and they saw a way to maybe get the more moderate Democrats and even maybe some more moderate Republicans back onto the opposed side. And going with my 90% certainty thing, it hasn't worked. But I guess my final word on this, because we can't spend the rest of our life talking about it, is...
Before your final word, I want to ask you one more question. Outside of Roe v. Wade, which, if Kavanaugh doesn't get in, Trump's just going to pick another person who's against Roe v. Wade, because he said that in the debates. He said, I'm going to only choose Supreme Court
candidates. Which, as Collins said, so has every Republican presidential candidate since 1980. Yeah. But continue.
So, outside of Roe v. Wade, why don't the Democrats want Kavanaugh?
Something about his statement that the president shouldn't be able to be charged with a crime.
Oh, because it can affect the Russia hearings?
Yeah, and then, Collins made a lot of good cases today. I watched the whole thing.
I only saw a clip of it.
And she made a lot of good cases. She said Nixon, who appointed 3 different people to the court, and she listed them off, she said, joined the unanimous decision to make him release the tapes, Mm-hmm. And you also have Neil Gorsuch, who voted against who voted with the liberal bloc of the court in the majority against having an illegal immigrant sent back because of a violent crime, because he said that the definition of a violent crime wasn't well defined. And there's a long pattern of judges not, or not just doing the bidding of the president, and
Yeah.
they've all sworn under oath,
Mhm.
pretty much, that they have not promised the president that nominated them that they're not going to do anything for them. So there's a few other reasons. It's, I think, besides the Roe v. Wade, it's the fact that there's no longer really a swing vote. The swing vote now is Justice Roberts, who is pretty much like, he's a pretty solid conservative. There's some cases where he votes with the liberals, but it wasn't like Kennedy, where Kennedy was like 60% of the time with the conservatives, and then 40% of the time with the liberals. It's more like an 80-20, if that, with Roberts. And I think that's the big issue, is it's now going to be an all-partisan court. And again, I sound like a broken record, but I guess, I just took a lot out of this speech. As Colin said, she hopes that we can eventually get to the point where there are fewer and fewer 5-4 cases. And that is my biggest problem, is that precedent is being set in 5-4 cases. And I guess even Brett Kavanaugh said that he does not think precedent should be able to be undone by a 5-4 vote, even though it can.
Yeah.
But anyway, so back to my final word, is that I am ultimately glad he was confirmed, because I do not think you should be able to, at the 11th hour, bring up an accusation and let it disrupt a process going on in America. And while it's giving voices to people to come forward, which is great, that's not really the point right now. The point is, what is happening to Kavanaugh? Is it fair? Is it true? They said he perjured himself under oath because he probably did drink to excess when he was 17. And it's like, he's 53, and remembering back to 17 and when he was drunk, like, just, if you're going to hold a 17-year-old something over their head for the rest of their life, like, yeah, if it was attempted rape, that's one thing. If it's being a drunk, stupid kid, like, it's just something, I just saw too much foul play in it, and ultimately I don't think that should detract from Kavanaugh, who I think ultimately is well qualified. So I'm happy with the decision. I'm not happy with the division it's causing in the country. I'm actually more upset about it than I thought I was going to be. So
my final word is, if they're trying to do a character assassination on him, I think there's no way to prove that he sexually assaulted anyone. I mean, if it turned out it was true, then absolutely, I don't think he should be on the Supreme Court. But there's no way to prove it, and in this country, we live in a country of beyond a reasonable doubt. I think that being a drunk when he was a teenager doesn't bother me. I think it was 35 years ago, and people change in 35 years, and if he's a respectable person now, that's all I care about. I don't want him to turn over Roe v. Wade. I am a supporter of Roe v. Wade. But outside of that, I don't think he's I got a vasectomy, so I don't have to worry about it, first of all, so it doesn't affect me in any way, shape, or form. But outside of that, I think he's a decent Supreme Court justice. I think that he's fiscally conservative, and I think that that's what we need to worry about right now in this economy. So, yeah, I'm hopeful that he gets confirmed. The last part of my final word is that history classes in the future are going to be a lot of fun. They're going to hit the Trump section, and they're going to learn about Stormy Daniels. They're going to learn about Mario Kart, because we learned that Trump's dick looks like Toad from Mario Kart. And then they're going to learn how Brett Kavanaugh might have raped a woman. And that will be...
well, and they're still talking about...
they're going to talk about the Devil's Triangle in school. I don't know what age they'll be learning
They're
about
still
Trump,
talking
but...
about... so much of that yearbook crap. And,
the point is that
they're still talking about
yearbook
Clarence Thomas,
Yeah, but in history books in the future, they're going to learn about Mario Kart and how Trump's dick looked like Toad from Mario Kart.
Yeah,
they're going to learn about Stormy Daniels. They're going to know who she is because she's a porn star and they can look it up on the internet. And then they're going to learn what a Devil's Triangle is, and it's going to be like high school for them, and it's going to be an awesome history class, that's for sure.
That's what I was told my high school was going to be like because of the Bill Clinton stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't think they covered it once, but it'll be different.
I don't even know if the word blowjob was brought up when we discussed Clinton, but when you and I were in high school, it was still relatively fresh. We're talking about a couple generations from now.
Yeah.
One more thing. This is it's kind of related to Kavanaugh, but I do want to cover it before we go over. Earlier, I said I didn't like Democrats because of the viciousness of them, and I think that Republicans can be vicious too. I think the way Lindsey Graham conducted himself in the Senate hearing, I like what he had to say, but I think he was a little bit nasty about it.
I thought he was excellent.
I thought I don't like people yelling. I don't like people screaming. I don't like people being rude. I would have preferred if he had said the exact same words, but in a calm tone. But the thing I wanted to cover before we move on, the reason why I corrected myself is because I want to say that there's viciousness on both sides, but I'm seeing it more on the Democratic side. And part of that is what happened to Jeff Flake and Mitch McConnell. Jeff Flake was in an elevator and he was getting screamed at by feminists. Mitch McConnell was in an airport and he was getting screamed at by feminists.
Where he assaulted a feminist, too.
Yeah, well, one of the security guards assaulted, quote unquote.
Because he pushed her aside.
Because he held her back from the senator. And this is, I don't want to linger on this for too long. It will just be real quick. But Flake's security guard and Mitch McConnell's security guard said, please stop. You know, Jeff Flake was trapped in an elevator by these feminists, and his security guard said, please stop, we need to go. Mitch McConnell was in an airport. He was walking around. The security guard said, please leave us alone. And it's like Mitch McConnell and Jeff Flake said, we do not consent, and these women continued to yell at them and scream.
That is a good point.
And it's like, if you want men to stop raping you, then you need to stop abusing men in that sense. And I know that that's going to get me in a lot of trouble.
No, I'm perfectly fine with that because there is a double standard. And that's what happens with the pendulum. Because men have been dicks too long, it's swinging back now. And now women have a voice and they're becoming dicks. And it's just going to be dicks swinging back and forth in a pendulum.
The defense against it is people think that it's part of free speech and that they live off of our tax dollars, so we're their boss. And it's like, you know, the same thing applies for police officers, but you're not going to be yelling at a police officer because you'll end up in jail.
This is why
I just think there's no reason in this world to be rude, to be screaming, to be harassing someone. It's just, I wish that people would be more respectful and calm. And there's other ways to handle things like voting, which Democrats fail to do. That's why Republicans own all three houses of government right now, is because Democrats didn't vote. It's like you fucked yourselves over. You have no one to blame but yourselves.
Yep.
You have any response to that, or you want to move on?
Yeah, what was I going to yell at you about? I don't remember, but yeah, it's a concerning situation. I just know that for about the first year or so, it's going to, you know, the decisions are going to say, you know, the decision was joined by blah, 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 and Brett Kavanaugh, who was recently, you know, a rape, blah, blah. Yeah. And then after a year or two goes
Brett
by.
Brett Kavanaugh was the defining vote.
Yeah, and after a year or two, that'll stop, just like it has with Gorsuch, you know, and just like it did with Clarence Thomas. Yeah. You know, so we'll get through this. I'm just worried about right now, and I'm worried about the future of, you know, I'm hopeful about the future of women being able to come forward, hopefully quicker, and, you know, with less fear. I'm also concerned about the future of men who possibly, you know, are being sought after. I mean, I've been accused of things I haven't done before, or things that have been taken out of context. So I know it does happen. And it's not always because the other person's wrong. It's because the other person didn't understand. Now, I'm not saying that's how it works with sex, but I'm saying there are situations where it's not black and white.
Yeah.
And in this society.
Why can't things just be a simple misunderstanding anymore?
They just can't. So
let's move on to Bill Cosby. I wanted this to be real quick. I just wanted to give my quick opinion on this. Bill Cosby was accused. What's it called when they're finally sentenced? I guess he was sentenced.
Convicted.
Convicted, yeah. So Bill Cosby was convicted of drugging and raping a woman. It was one of the many accusations. I believe he was only convicted for one of the many accusations, but he was accused by many women. I believe over 60, spanning several decades. And you know, I do believe that The court said that Bill Cosby was guilty, so I believe Bill Cosby was guilty. I believe he is a bad man, and I believe he does need to be in jail. He's 81 years old, and he's going to die in jail. He's there for 2 to 10 years. I believe he's going to die in jail.
Wait, have they sentenced him?
Yeah, they sentenced him for 3 to 10 years in jail, I believe. But his lawyer is going to try to refute it. I don't know how much power he has. I don't think it's going to go through. But one of the things he wanted was for Bill Cosby to just be under house arrest because he's an 81-year-old blind man.
He's blind?
Yeah, he's blind. He's almost completely blind right now. Like I don't think he has any vision at all. If you look at his eyes, he has fucked up eyes right now. But he's going to die in jail. That's
Children
the thing.
are listening. Probably not.
But the reason why this was notable to me is because Bill Cosby did so much for the black community. The Cosby Show, for me personally, is a show that I grew up with, that I learned a lot from. He taught me a lot of life lessons. One of the famous clips that my mom showed me all the time was him talking to one of his sons on the show about going to college and why you need to go to college. It didn't have any effect on me because I only got an associate's degree. I didn't actually get like a bachelor's degree in college. But the point still stands is that his show did a lot for the black community. And I think that if I had not seen the Cosby Show, I don't think I would go as far to say that I would be a racist, but I think that the Cosby Show definitely in my early years gave me a positive view of black people and made me less afraid of them. Because in the movies in the 90s when I was growing up in the early 80s,
yeah.
You know, it was like black people were portrayed as thugs and stuff like that. And if that was my only exposure to black people, then yeah, you know, racist might not be the right word, but afraid definitely would be the right word of black people. Whereas Bill Cosby, along with like Mr. Rogers, who wasn't black, but he had a lot of black people on his show. He had the black mailman who he was notable for. But Bill Cosby specifically, it's like, because of his show, I think I turned out to be a better person. And so, you know, yes, Bill Cosby's a bad man. He's been convicted of this. So the court says he's guilty. So I have to say he's guilty if I have any faith in the court system. But I do think it's a shame, and I think it should be notable what he did. And it's just a upsetting situation, and it makes me sad. The main reason I wanted to talk about this is because I believe it was on Bill Maher's show or one of the late night shows. He brought up Bill Cosby was convicted, and the entire audience screamed cheering, like they were really excited about it. And for me personally, I'm a little bit more conflicted on the situation because I think that he did do a lot of good, and it's unfortunate that he was a really bad man behind the scenes.
It's kind of like how I thought, like, once all the votes were there to confirm Kavanaugh,
Yeah.
I was just going to be in a state of ecstasy, and then I was like, oh, this kind of sucks. Like,
Yeah.
our nation is divided right now, like
Yeah.
more than it has been in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I would say the same thing about Bill Cosby. At first, when I first heard the accusations, you know, like I was like, no, like that's Bill Cosby. Like I grew up watching his shows, and you sometimes look at the character and you think the character is the person in real life.
Yeah.
And Cosby has always played, you know.
Well, his stand-up was pretty similar to his character. I mean, he talked about like not sagging your pants and the way you should be, like how black people should act. That's a racist way to put it, but coming from a black person, he was like, if you're a black person, don't be sagging your pants.
Well, somebody,
kind of thing.
Another friend of mine, when I think before this Bill Cosby stuff came up, like in high school, he told me something like Bill Cosby used to tell like black people, like, stop blaming white people for your problems or something.
I
don't know
that specifically, but that wouldn't sound wrong.
I don't know how true that is, but the fact is you're right about, he was a respectable person on TV. Him and his wife were lawyers and doctors, and not just that. So it's not just that they were well-to-do. It was the fact that they could make it to those positions and then also get through the same daily struggles that the rest of middle-class white people do. And, you know, it normalized that for us, and it showed us that, you know, black people aren't that different, because you're right, in the 90s we kind of did grow up with that. You know, now that you're saying it, it makes a little sense to me. Like, we did grow up with that, but then we also grew up with, you know, these other lessons we learned. And so the way I kind of see it is it's kind of like, you know, a person losing their faith after, you know, their pastor molests them or something, you know, or the church has hurt them. As a Christian, I've seen this a lot, not the molest part, but as a Christian, I've seen a lot of people be hurt by the church, and in turn, they turn away from God. And I think that's a very strong comparison for me on what I'm seeing with the Bill Cosby. So, yeah.
Anything else to say about that?
No, nothing else.
Cool. All right, so we're going to do a quick game. It was my turn to come up with the game this time. And I apologize I wasn't able to come up with a game that wasn't super political. But what I did was I came up with a true and false game about Washington State. We live in Washington State. So I figured I'd give Matt some true and false questions. And there's only 10 questions. They should be quick. True or false is what your guess is. So
I'm going to get probably an 8 out of 10.
All right, let's see. Let's start with number 1. Washington is the only state named after a president. True or false? There's dead air.
I'm trying to go through all the states, and that's not fair. I'm going to say... I'm going to say false.
It's true.
Damn it!
Washington State is the only state named after a president.
Well, and you know
don't cheat and look at the answers, by the way.
How am I going to look at them? What's bullcrap about that is there's already a Washington D.C. Why can't we just call D.C. D.C.
I
and
wish
us be Washington? I'm so sick of us being the only state where we have to.
When you look at
clarify
Washington on Google, you have to type in Washington
Yeah,
State.
you have to type in.
It's bullshit.
Crap. Anyway.
Fucking first world problems.
I know. Yeah. Hashtag first world problems.
Let me see.
Some people don't get clean water. We have to deal with our state being labeled wrong. Oh,
Jesus Christ, our lives are hard.
White people problems. Right.
Let me see. Number 2, our state dance, Washington State dance, is the square dance. True or false?
I'm gonna say false.
That is true. Washington State's dance is the square dance.
I feel like that sounded familiar, but then I was thinking like that's too southern. Like we're probably the electric slide or something. But, all right, I got 8 more to get correct. So
number 3, Washington has the most waterfalls per capita. True or false?
That's false.
That is false. I made that one up. I mean, it could be true.
Wait, you haven't fact checked your own falsities?
I have, in fact. Oh wait, you got that one right. Sorry. No, yeah, the ones that I made up that are false, I did not fact check them. But there's no way to just check how many are there more waterfalls in Washington per person.
I guarantee you could Google waterfalls per capita per state.
How did you guess false on that? Did you just see that
I
it was
just
ridiculous?
figured. A quick side thing. We had pop quizzes each week in 11th grade American history. And the very first one, all the answers were false. And the teacher said, now, how many of you changed some of them because you thought too many of them were true? And, like, everybody raised their hand. He's like, don't do that. He's like, the answer to the question isn't based off the last one. But that's how most people write tests. So I figured you did shoot true. You probably had a false coming.
Number 4, the Space Needle is 1,000 feet tall. True or false?
Exactly 1,000 feet?
Yeah, the Space Needle is 1,000 feet tall. Is that true or false?
False.
It is false. That is false. You got it correct. It is actually 605 feet
I was going to say 600 feet, but
605, yeah. Washington State entered the Union on November 11th, 1889.
That is 100% absolutely true.
That is true. Good job. Let me see. Washington State is the 40th state to enter the Union.
No, it's the 42nd.
Wow, god damn it, Matt. You're smart.
I try.
Or you're a fucking nerd.
One or the other.
Mount Rainier is named after Peter Rainier, a British soldier who fought against the Americans in the Revolutionary War.
That is true.
That is true. Jesus Christ, Matt.
Loves
Fuck.
you. Loves me.
Washington State produces more apples than any other state.
True.
That is true. We create a lot of apples here. Bill Gates is the richest person in Washington State right now.
That's true.
That is false. You got it wrong.
What?
Jeff Bezos has $166.3 billion. That's his net worth right now, whereas Bill Gates is $98.2 billion.
Wait, hold on. Give me those numbers.
Jeff Bezos' current net worth is $166.3 billion, whereas Bill Gates' net worth is $98.2 billion.
I'm going to fact check that and bring it up. next episode. So that,
Jeff Bezos is currently the richest person in the world. He passed Bill Gates a long time ago.
and he lives in Washington.
He lives in
And
Washington.
is he the Amazon guy?
Yeah, he's the Amazon guy.
I'm still not going to believe you, but okay, go ahead and go on with the next one because that puts me to 70 right now, and I'm pretty pissed
The
about
10th and final question.
it. What?
Sex with a horse is legal in Washington State.
Sex with a horse used to be legal as long as you were giving. Now it's illegal either way.
I think you're right. It's false. But what you said before that, I think, was wrong. It was completely illegal until 2006 when someone died from having sex with a horse. I've seen the video. You can find it on the internet.
I saw the same video because you
I showed it
me
too, yeah,
because
yeah.
you're afraid.
And that video, the only reason why it's available on the internet, because it's technically bestiality, but the only reason why that video is available on the internet is because it was used in the court case, and it's like documented evidence or something, but it's a really quick video. It's like less than a minute long. I want our viewers to know about this wonderful video. It's a man who got penetrated by a horse, and the horse's fucking 3-foot long dong went all the way inside of his body. It ruptured his fucking anus, and he died from internal bleeding. So
All right.
that was
so
in 2006. It happened in Enumclaw, I believe, and
It was Enumclaw.
immediately afterward, they made it illegal.
I'm pretty sure beforehand it was
It was legal before that because the people who were with him didn't get in trouble because it was legal at the time that they did it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Because I mean, the person who filmed it and the other person who was in the video, he wasn't naked, but he was holding the horse's cock to the guy's asshole.
gross. That's fucking nasty. All right.
Our podcast is only the top quality.
Only. So we're at 51 minutes, but the thing we're about to discuss is really important. I've wanted to talk about it previously. I didn't want to bring it up too early, but capital punishment in America is a big one that I think needs to be discussed between me and Riley, because Riley is Quadrant for Politics host libertarian,
Mhm.
and I
I
am
am the libertarian host.
Yes, I was trying to say like you're our token libertarian, but there's two of us. Anyway, I am the
Don't call me
conservative.
token.
I am the conservative. Libertarians, from what I understand, would seem to think that
They are violently against the death penalty, violently against capital punishment.
and there are many arguments for and against. The number one main reason I am against it,
So you're a Republican and you are against
I
the
am
death
firmly
penalty.
against the death penalty.
I am a libertarian and I support the death penalty.
And
So we're opposites in our
we're
perspective.
opposites of what we should be. And this is what I thought when we started a podcast. I said what's interesting is how some issues we are opposite on when we should be the other way. And then other issues we reach the same conclusion, but for completely different reasons.
Yep.
And with this issue, there's two real main things to me. One is that I think history will look back and say, what a barbaric thing, which doesn't stop me from thinking other things about,
Well, the death penalty has been, I mean, it's the weakest now that it's ever been in history. There were public decapitations and hangings. We don't have that anymore. So, over time we'll probably go away, but I guess we do look at those things in the past as barbaric. So, yeah, you're right.
And
We'll
it's-
probably look at it as
I
barbaric.
mean, even though, the number, like 98 was the pinnacle since the reinstatement in 76. And
So it was illegal for a while?
it was illegal for a while. The Supreme Court declared it was illegal because it wasn't being administered fairly.
Okay.
And then Georgia came up with some way that made it fair, and the Supreme Court said it was fine. So the other states started saying, "Oh, okay, we come up with our own rules." And then the court started saying, "Okay, yeah, your things are fine." So for a while, they thought it was going to go away completely in America. We are one of the only first world Western countries that currently have the death penalty.
Hold on. We don't compare ourselves to other countries because other countries are bullshit.
This is true. We are Americans, and therefore we are exceptional.
If we lived like other countries, we would be a lot more liberal than we are right now.
This is true. On the political compass, it was showing like where most Americans fall in like quadrant 1, like in the top, like the middle top left of it, so of that quadrant. So Anyway, and the rest of the world was like all over. But
Yeah.
anyway, so my problem with it is that I I do consider myself a libertarian. On the political compass test, I am right on the line, but I am on the side of the libertarian. And there are some situations where I think, well, in pretty much all situations, I like to defer to Constitution or to law or to our rights. So the government affords us certain rights, and it also, the law's there for a reason. As to where libertarians more often would rather say, screw the law, let's get rid of that law and let's make it freer. And
Absolutely.
but that's fine once we get rid of the law. Until then, it's like, people going on change.org in December of 2016 trying to stop Trump from entering the White House. Like, your time to do that was a month ago, buddy.
Should have voted.
Like, exactly. So the death penalty, though, there is a big problem with the fact that our government is able to take the life of one of its citizens. And that citizen probably did something horrendous. It probably did something worthy of death. But the fact is that the death is being carried out by the state. That is highly concerning for somebody who thinks that the government should have a limited role in the individual's life. So what do you think?
I support the death penalty. The main reason I support it is because having someone in jail is very expensive, and it's not a proper way to live your life. I don't believe that jails should be very nice. I don't think that there should be any incentive to go to jail. I know in Norway they have very nice jails. The jails in Norway, from what I hear, are a lot nicer than student dorms in our country. So I don't think that jail should be a nice place to go, and I think that if someone's sentenced to life, like if one of these high school shooters goes to jail for the rest of their life, I think that they're just rotting in there for the rest of their life on our tax dollars, and I think that that's an idiotic thing to do. If someone, obviously, I think the death penalty should be reserved for people who commit heinous acts.
Horrendous? You mean heinous?
Heinous.
Or horrendous?
Both of those words. That's what I meant. Horrendous. Her-anus.
Yeah, I got it.
Anyways, I think it's a waste of tax dollars, and I think putting someone in jail for the rest of their lives is a waste on their life, because they're not really living. They're in jail, and that's shitty, and they're probably getting raped and all sorts of bad stuff in jail and put in solitary confinement and going insane. Hold on, I'm not done.
Okay.
I also don't value human life that much, and that's probably an unpopular opinion, but I don't think that humans are all like fucking out, not exactly what everyone makes them out to be, that life is this magical thing. I think that we're destroying the planet. Obviously, my politics aren't that the government should be saving the planet, but I do think that we are destroying the planet. I think nature is more important than humans, and
nature is more important than humans.
I would say that, although nature will survive humans
That's
no matter
paganism,
what.
but not surprising.
Not in that kind of witch sense. That's not how I meant it. But the fact of the matter is that when someone gives birth, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so magical and so wonderful. And it's like, fuck off. People have been doing that all through their life. It's like being a mother isn't anything special. It's like, you got fucking knocked up. Good for you.
So is that like saying
like literally every human in existence has done that, because that's how we're still here today.
So a new star, like being born, isn't like still considered awesome?
A new star?
Yeah.
Like a star in our galaxy?
Exactly.
That's not a human life.
But the point's the same. The point is there's tons of them, but each one is still...
Well, I think for us, ourselves, because we don't understand it, yeah. But if we understood stars and we could go and see them, it'd just be like a grain of sand. It's like, oh, that's cool, another grain of sand. I don't think that human life is all that special. And I think along with the death penalty, this is kind of something different, but I think that people should have the right to choose if they want to die. I think that the suicide booths that exist in Futurama should absolutely be legal, and that if a company wants to create a suicide booth, that they should be on the streets, and if you're feeling bad one day, just walk into the suicide booth and kill yourself.
To our listeners, I'm nodding my head just vigorously.
Nodding is agreeing. Shaking your head is disagreeing. Shaking is going.
Yeah,
side to
no,
side.
nodding. It's just me rolling my eyes and going,
Yeah.
"What the?" Like I've seen those suicide videos on Facebook. I'm like, no, a whole different topic. Wanting to commit suicide is a mental illness that needs to be helped. As I've told Riley before,
it could be considered suicide by cop because that is a thing.
as I've told Riley before, when somebody's about to jump off a bridge, you reach out to pull them back in. That's still the popular view in society, as to where Riley thinks, give them a hand and push them off. And in that case, you get to go to jail. But
not if it wasn't against the law.
I do think human life is very important. I would say I'm somebody who says,
that probably has something to do with being religious, right? You would think.
Well, besides just that, I mean, the fact that
I'm not saying that every atheist like myself thinks that human life isn't important, but I do think that being religious makes you put more value in human life.
I mean, do you not have anyone that you love or care about that you would hate to see go? Or
absolutely, that if someone I loved was like, "Hey, dude, I am not happy with my life. It's every day is pain and terrible, and existence is awful. I'm gonna kill myself." I'd be like, "Hey, dude, I'd miss you. Don't do that. But that's your right, and I'm not gonna stop you because what kind of asshole does that make me?" If I say, no, you have to live your shitty life every day so that I don't have to be sad. I think that's a really
well, as somebody who's living in that situation, I'm letting you know it's pretty shitty.
I've been depressed too, and it's like
no, I'm not saying depressed. I'm saying I'm living in this situation where my sister killed herself. Not something I want to bring up to brag about, but it's fucked over our family. And had she not just had the one moment which she had many of those one moments, but the one moment where she went through with it, our family would
I also believe in personal responsibility, and I've had suicidal thoughts before, but I thought about it, and I was like, I think I can turn my life around instead of being suicidal and killing myself.
But why, if your life has no value?
I think that's a part of just what you need to think about, and it's part of personal responsibility. Is you need to look at yourself and look at your future and say, do I have any value? Do I see any value in keeping going? And if you say no, I understand that there's science saying, dopamine and there's drugs to help people not be depressed, but that's a whole other debate. But I think that it's kind of a selfish thing to expect someone who's suicidal and miserable in their life to continue living if they don't want to. That's what my mom did. My mom attempted suicide right in front of me. I came home to her slitting her wrist. I had to call the cops, and she went to the hospital for 48 hours or whatever. They had to hold her and stuff, and it was like she didn't want to live. And so what'd she do? She drank herself to death. And it's like that's kind of the experience that I grew up around. So she would have been way happier if she had killed herself 10 years ago, as opposed to drinking herself to death and slowly dying and like being miserable on the couch and in pain. She could have killed herself 10 years ago. We would have moved on, and it would have been a lot better than just watching her die slowly and being a pain on the family.
Well, as to somebody where my sister had a lot of...
And your sister was a shame because she was a lot younger.
She was. And she was somebody that had suicidal thoughts for a long time. And she even told me probably like 6 months before it. She said, I'm really suicidal. And you know what I said to her? I said, please don't. Like, that would really suck. Now, the thought even went through my head of what's going to happen when she dies. The fact of the matter is, I was 21 when she passed. My younger brother was 11. On November 1st, it's going to be 7 years. Mm-hmm. My younger siblings, all the ones younger than me, will never have gotten to know my sister that way. So your mom's situation is unique in the fact that there wasn't that attachment because she was so disconnected.
Yeah. As
to where people who have these ups and downs, they take suicide and there's a term that they make a temporary problem, and suicide is the permanent solution. But anyway, I think we're getting a little off track.
We need to talk about the death penalty. It's just taxes is my reason. I think taxation is theft.
Except it costs more to execute somebody.
This is where our main debate comes in.
Exactly.
So how much does it cost to kill someone? And I think it costs the price of a bullet.
But it doesn't, because the average person spends about 18 years on.
See, in you say that like I care because I'm a libertarian. I am against, or I am for getting rid of all of those checks and balances for the most part. Obviously, I
So
believe in the
you are
court system.
for getting rid of the 14th Amendment, which guarantees people the process to go through all those appeals.
Amendments are amendments because they can be amended.
Well, but regardless of if I'm saying amendment or if I'm saying an article, blah, 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 of the Constitution, the point is what's special about the amendments is that they've become more vital.
And the amendments don't matter. Oh, wait, I see where you're going.
They've become more vital in current times. That's why we talk about them more than we talk about other parts of the Constitution.
Yeah.
And also, I mean,
and so what's the 14th Amendment?
It's your right to, I might be misquoting, I'm pretty sure it's the 14th. It's your right to due process. It's your right to.
Yeah, a due process is going through the court case and having a jury of your peers decide your fate. And I absolutely 100% agree with that. And we've talked about this before, is if we did get rid of everything after that, like after the court process, if the jury of your peers votes that you are guilty and you are sentenced to death, which, by the way, the jury, don't they get to decide what your punishment should be, and then the judge decides that, like, makes the executive decision on that?
In every state except one of the deep south ones, so either Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, or Arkansas, one of those, the jury gives its recommendation, and the judge makes the final decision. In every other state, the jury decides, and I think in most, if not all of those states, the jury has to be unanimous. So if one person says life instead of death, then they get life in prison.
Okay. Well, if the jury says that someone should be put to death, and it turns out they're innocent later, then that is on. The guilt should only lie on the jury, and they even shouldn't feel that much guilt because that means the defense did not do a good enough job presenting their case.
There are so many.
Even if evidence comes out later, it's still the defense's job to find that evidence during the court case. It's like, welcome to our society.
Except what about the prosecutors who hide the evidence from the defense because they want to have a successful prosecution? The fact of the matter is that
for the prosecutor,
it should be, but somebody shouldn't have to die because of that. And the problem is that we have an imperfect legal system, and the reason it's imperfect is because it's made by humans who are imperfect beings.
Yep.
Our legal system will never be perfect, and as long as that's the case, and I hate to quote, actually I'm not even sure it's her I'm quoting. I was thinking maybe it was Hillary Clinton that said it, but somebody said the fact of the matter with execution is there's such a finality to it. You can't undo it. You can't release the person. You can't give them back lost time. You can't give them retribution money, which I also think anybody who's wrongfully in prison should be given some sort of payment from the government.
Yeah, but it's a detriment on the rest of society that we have to pay those taxes.
Well, then we need to go back to that beyond a reasonable doubt, not just like, oh, I feel like he probably did it.
Well, that's up to the jury. It lies on them.
And that's becoming part of the problem with society, though, is that we're getting this. Everybody's a victim, and so the victim's rights are more important than the person on trial.
I'm saying if we get rid of all the checks and balances after the jury decision, which will save us a ton of money, just a bullet in the head after the jury makes their decision. If it is found out later that the person was innocent. And this happens, if there's one really big case that blows up, or if it's a constant thing that keeps happening where it turns out that people who received capital punishment turned out to be innocent, then that's on the duty of future juries to be like, wait a minute, juries in the past have been wrong before. Maybe we should just put this guy in prison for the rest of his life, and they should make that decision,
Considering the fact that...
I'm in favor of putting the power in the people's hands.
So I think it was like 2015. Don't quote me on that, but it was a record low year of executions in the United States. I think it was like 29 in the entire United States. Because right now, I think at least 20, if not about 25 of the states, they don't have executions. And then of the ones that do perform executions, the majority of executions, not even the majority, the vast majority, like 80% of them, come from like 10 different counties. So the problem is also that, which is one of the things that was brought up in the original repeal of the death penalty, was that they weren't being administered fairly. It was like if you committed your crime in this county, you were going to get the death penalty, as opposed to if you did it in the next county over.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is it worth it for those 29 people? Wouldn't it just be easier to have them all live out the rest of their natural life instead of it's not
It's
like
a lot of money to keep people in jail, though.
but we're talking about, let's say we're talking now about an average of about 50 a year.
And also, jail is miserable. It's like, even if someone goes to jail for like 50 years, let's say they're 20 and they go to jail for 50 years, so they're 70 when they get when they're 70, they've spent 50 years in jail. Evidence comes out that they were innocent. They get out at 70. They're fucking insane because they probably had solitary confinement. They've probably been raped and they've spent 50 fucking years in jail. They're not a person at that point.
Well,
they're dead inside.
I am also a conservative who strongly supports prison reform, as in no rape, no solitary confinement. I'm not saying it needs to be Norway. It should definitely be a deterrent. I think more than a deterrent, it needs to be rehabilitative. But
I disagree. I think we should take an entire state, turn it into a prison, just let it be anarchy in there.
That's because you're a savage and you have no regard for human life. But that's fine. I like you anyway.
Because I think there needs to be a strong deterrent to commit crime. That is part of being a libertarian, is that you have all this freedom, but the minute you fuck up, you are getting fucked in the ass.
What about the fact that
not literally, but
so many people... So eventually the Supreme Court has had to decide that if you are mentally handicapped, you can't be executed. You can't, that can't take place. And whether or not we agree or disagree with that is one thing. But isn't anybody who decides to kill somebody else, doesn't that kind of fall under mentally incompetent? You made one of the stupidest choices. You made a choice to take another human's life.
I think that someone who's mentally competent can have a really bad day. And that's kind of in our state we have a law, gun control law with pistols. If you go to Big Five across the street and buy a gun over there, a pistol, they won't. You can pay for it, but you don't get it for 2 weeks. And the reason why they do that is to give you a calm down period. You can go buy a shotgun and bring it back and shoot everyone here if you like. But a pistol's a little bit more discreet. And it's so if you're mad at your boss, you don't go across the street, buy a pistol and shoot him in the face. You get 2 weeks of a cooling period. And so the reason why that exists is because there are people who are mentally capable who just have a bad day. And I mean, I've had bad days before. I've never wanted to kill someone, but I mean, I have, but not literally thinking about it. More like just I fucking hate that person. I hope they die, kind of thing,
But if you're a person who has a bad day and you get to the point of wanting to kill somebody, there's so much about the brain we don't know. And the fact is, we're learning more and more.
It could be a temporary break, but I think for the most part, a sane person can have a bad day. I believe that.
True, but we're learning more and more that these people who have committed horrendous, violent crimes all share certain brain patterns that the rest of society does not, which means ultimately...
A lot of the shooters have suffered abuse in the past.
Okay.
And are abusive people themselves.
So we're executing then abusive people.
And then maybe
people who've been abused.
Maybe you should execute the abusers as well.
When you execute any one group, I think that is usually considered genocide, but...
Yeah.
And you're just comfortable with, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if someone kills a bunch of people, yes, they should die. I don't care what their backstory is. You shot up a school, you should die.
And if you shoot up a school, I'm not gonna there's never been anybody on death row I've cried for, to be honest. And when I hear about, when on days where people are being executed, especially if it's a bigger one, I usually will watch the countdown. I will watch for last minute appeals. I'll watch the Supreme Court give a 3-hour stay and then hear that they're executed. And a little piece of me is like, wow, that really sucks, because ultimately 20 years later, nothing is different other than that person. It's just the fact of the process. You take them out of the cell, you walk them down in chains. They see the end of their life coming and being administered in a way that looks humane. It defies all logic and all rationale, and I do not understand why conservatives who claim to be for life and who typically, from a religious view, say we're all guilty, can support this. And I feel like if I wasn't so distracted with the other things in the news this week, like Kavanaugh
But
and the Van Dyke thing,
no response to
I would,
how terrible jail is, and do you really want to live in jail for 50 years? Would you rather be in jail for the rest of your life, or would you rather
since
just
when are we
take a
giving
bullet
them
right
the
then?
choice?
I think that they should be given a choice.
Why was there?
If the
victim
choice
given
is
a
between
choice?
life in jail and death, that's not much of a choice that we're giving them. It's not like, well, would you rather have this really cozy bed or this bed of spikes? It's no. Do you want to choose between death or jail for the rest of your life? It's not like it's a pleasant decision to make. I think, if someone's in jail for 50 years, they're going to be dead inside if they come out when they're 70 and it turns out they're innocent.
Well, you're also giving up the idea of hope and redemption and a
Also,
possible
we were
future
talking
in
about
prison.
not that long ago. It's only been an hour and 15 minutes since we were talking about it. This thing with Kavanaugh happened 35 years ago, and there's no way to prove it. If someone is in jail for 35 years, there's no way that evidence is going to come out that's going to proclaim them innocent.
That's not true. That's happened before.
Okay, well then, I mean, your opinion
Because-
on Kavanaugh should have changed
because-
a little bit then.
No, because there's been no new DNA tests
Yeah.
that have been able to produce that. Most rapes end with no conviction, and the reason for that is because the woman usually goes home and
Showers or something.
showers and usually like cries. And I'm not trying to make it like sound like a sad TV
Yeah,
scene,
no,
but she usually goes home, cries in the shower, freaks out.
Yeah.
And when you take a shower, you can't do the rape kit.
Yeah.
However, with murder, there's a little more leeway as to the evidence that can be admitted, and with all the time we're getting new and new evidence or new and new DNA that shows us that what we thought was the situation in one person's case turns out, their DNA got there a different way, or the genetic markers were only a partial match, and now we have more information and we have a bigger picture. But the fact is that the potential innocence of the person getting executed, for liberals, it's very high on their list of why they're against it. For me, it's kind of on the low end. While I don't think anybody should be, executed, who's innocent, that's not my main reason, because we could do away with that by saying only people we've caught on camera, or only people who've killed law enforcement or have killed 5 or more people. There's some cases where 2 or 3 people are executed for the death of one person, and that to me is always concerning, because it's not like all 3 of them have their fingers on the trigger.
Okay,
So.
I'll give you this. If the government is running the prison system, I believe in the death penalty. But if we privatize the prison system so that taxpayers aren't paying for it, it's a wealthy person who owns the prison, then sure, get rid of it.
So you're okay with execution being carried out so long as the government does it?
Yeah.
And you're a libertarian because how?
What do you mean?
Like, libertarians would say the government shouldn't be able to do something like that.
Well, I disagree with the libertarians on this one. Libertarians are very much against the death penalty.
I know,
but
but
libertarians are also for privatizing the jail system, and a lot of the jail system is privatized right now. That's why there's for-profit jails, and that's a whole other discussion on its own. But if the taxpayers aren't paying for that person to be in jail, then I don't care if they're in jail or if they die, because it's not on me. But as of right now, we pay for those people to be in jail.
In
and it costs a
any
lot of money.
case, due process is not going to go away. It's not,
I'm supportive of due process, just not after the court system.
but that's not
I
how
think
it works.
once the
You don't just get to get rid of your appeals.
what is that wooden hammer
The gavel?
called? Yeah, once the gavel hits the table, I believe that is the sentence. And then give them a year, and if new evidence comes up in that year, then yeah, maybe retrial them. But after like a year or so, it's like, bam, bullet to the head. No money on us. I'll pay for the bullet.
So I guess the parts where you differ are, I think it's a completely inhumane process, and an inhumane process should not be carried out by the government. As far as it goes, as far as execution in and of itself constitutionally, the Supreme Court has decided that it somehow does not violate cruel and unusual punishment. I disagree with that, but I respect their finding. So I think it's up to the legislator to do something about that. And more states are making it illegal. There's not a lot of states bringing it back. So it's something that's going to go away because that's where the future's taking us.
I would vote for if the death penalty, if capital punishment goes away. I'm not going to be too upset over it. I just personally that I think it should exist.
So we can get rid of those 50 people a year. Yeah, makes total sense.
We're at an hour 20. What is your final word on the death penalty?
My final word on the death penalty is, while it might be fair in practice, or fair in thought, it's inhumane in practice. It is a burden on the taxpayers, and it is something that no civilized government should be able to put on any of their citizens, regardless of what they did. And I would like to say the exception to that, of course, is that I'm fine if the president orders an assassination of like a foreign terrorist, like Obama did with Osama, or Bush did with Hussein, like that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people who are tried in American courts under the under the court system in America. I do not believe that death is a logical or humane way for a state to respond to its citizens, and I think it takes away from our freedoms because, again, when you take away somebody's freedom, it's not necessarily that the freedom's taken away, it's that the power is given to the government. The more power you give to the government, the more freedom is going to be taken away. And if we could take that power from the government and say you can never again take the life of a citizen, we would be freer as people. And that's my final word.
My final word is I believe in the death penalty. The way it's done right now is not good because, as Matt said, it is more expensive to put someone to death than to keep them in prison for the rest of their lives. But I believe that the death penalty should be made easier, simpler, and cheaper. And I just don't think that people who are criminals and killing people, and if the jury believes beyond a reasonable doubt that they committed the crime, then they should be put to death. And I think if it's gotten to a point where a jury believes that beyond a reasonable doubt that this person's guilty, and evidence comes out to prove that they're not guilty, it's like what was there for the jury to think that was beyond a reasonable doubt? So I believe in the death penalty, but if you guys want to privatize prisons and make a wealthy person pay to keep someone in jail for the rest of their lives, then good. Just don't make me pay for it. That's ridiculous. That's my final word.
Okay. And before we sign off, I just want to say this probably won't be the last time this discussion comes up.
Oh, not at all.
I would love to go into depth more about this because me and Riley are completely opposite on this. Riley's completely wrong on this, and there's so much more. We got into talking about suicide, the value of life. There's so much more on this we could talk about. We've gone way over time, and I look forward to having a good discussion about it in the future.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching and listening. We appreciate it. Let's see. You can find us on YouTube, SoundCloud, and you can email us at quadrant4politics@gmail.com. That's the number 4, quadrant4politics@gmail.com. Please, please, please send us emails or comments. We really enjoy replying to those on the show. We didn't have any this week, but please, if you have any thoughts or opinions about the stuff we talked about, or any questions for us, or even comments about how we can make the podcast better, we are very welcome to those, and we will happily read them on the air. And
if you're okay with it.
Yeah, if you're okay with it, obviously. And I think that is it. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.